right now, at this exact moment, Donald Trump is standing at the edge of a legal cliff that he built himself brick by brick with his own hands. I need you to stop whatever you are doing and pay attention, because what is unfolding in a federal courtroom is not just another political skirmish. This is a trap. And the most extraordinary part? Trump walked into it voluntarily. In the next 23 minutes, I am going to show you 3 separate layers of crisis converging on one man at the same time. The lawsuit he should never have filed, the deposition he cannot escape, and the secrets that 7 hours of sworn testimony could drag into daylight forever. Subscribe right now and turn on every notification, because this is exactly the kind of analysis that disappears quietly, and you need to see it before that happens. Stay with me, because at the 14-minute mark, everything clicks into place. Here is the thing that nobody in mainstream media is talking about right now. While the entire world has been watching missiles fly over Tehran, while oil markets have been in free fall, while Trump has been on television every single day talking about Iran and bombing and regime change, a federal court case has been quietly moving forward. And that case, sitting in relative silence beneath the noise of a war, may end up being the most consequential legal moment of this entire presidency. Do you know why this story disappeared from the headlines? I need you to think about that for a second, because it did not disappear because it became less important. It disappeared because other things became louder, and loud things have always been Trump's greatest weapon. Create enough noise, generate enough chaos, and the thing that actually matters gets buried underneath it all. I have spent the last several weeks going through the original court filings, the actual transcript of the judge's ruling, the Federal Election Commission records, the handwriting analysis commissioned by independent forensic experts, the Wall Street Journal's sourcing methodology, not summaries, not other people's takes, the primary documents themselves. And what I found is this. This is not a story about a birthday card. This is not a story about a drawing. This is a story about a man who reflexively sued his way into a corner that his own legal team may not be able to get him out of. Here is what you need to understand before we go any further. Trump filed this lawsuit in February of 2026. The court dismissed his initial complaint, and then Trump announced he would refile. That single decision, that one announcement, is where everything changes. That is the moment the trap closed. And I am going to show you exactly why, layer by layer, starting right now. Let me show you something that most people completely missed when the judge handed down this ruling. When a federal court dismisses a complaint, there are 2 very different ways that can happen. The first way is the court looks at your case and says, this is over, you have no path forward, go home. The second way is the court looks at your case and says, you have not proven your argument yet, but here is the door, and it is open. What Judge dismissed Trump's initial complaint with was the second option. He granted what is called leave to amend. And on the surface, Trump's team celebrated that as a partial victory. A technical defect, they said, easily fixed, they said. I need you to understand why that framing is exactly backwards. Leave to amend exists in our legal system for a very specific and legitimate reason. Sometimes a plaintiff has a genuinely strong case, but misses a procedural element, fails to include the right legal language, or overlooks a technical requirement. The court does not want to throw out a meritorious case over a technicality. So it gives the plaintiff one more opportunity to get it right. That is the theory. That is what the rule was designed for. But here is what actually happens when a plaintiff like Donald Trump uses leave to amend. He does not use it to fix a small technical error. He uses it to buy time, to keep the case alive on paper without ever intending to face what comes next. File the initial complaint, ask for extensions, wait for the dismissal, file the amended complaint, ask for more extensions, let the clock run, drag it out 12 to 18 months until the story fades and people move on. This is a documented litigation strategy. It is not speculation. It is a pattern with receipts. Do you see what happened here? The judge did not save Trump. The judge handed Trump a loaded weapon, and Trump is pointing it directly at himself. Now, let me tell you about the specific legal standard that Trump failed to meet in his initial complaint. Under a landmark Supreme Court decision called New York Times versus Sullivan, a public figure suing for defamation cannot simply prove that a story was wrong. They have to prove what the law calls actual malice. That means proving the publisher either knew the story was false at the time of publication or acted with reckless disregard for whether it was true or false. This is a deliberately high bar. It exists to protect press freedom. And Trump's original complaint, according to the judge's own words in the ruling, failed to adequately plead that the Wall Street Journal acted with actual malice. Here is the critical detail. Fixing that failure is technically simple. You add the right language to your amended complaint. You use the magic words. You allege with greater specificity that the Wall Street Journal knowingly published false information. Child's play for an experienced legal team. But the moment you do that, and the moment you make those allegations with the specificity required to survive a motion to dismiss, you have just opened every door in the building, because now the Wall Street Journal's legal team can walk through every single one of those doors during discovery. They can depose witnesses. They can request documents. And most importantly, they can depose the plaintiff himself. And here is where everything changes. Trump is the plaintiff. He brought this case. He cannot hide behind procedural arguments the way a defendant sometimes can. He cannot claim executive privilege over a civil defamation suit he personally initiated. His deposition is not optional. It is not avoidable. It is a legal certainty the moment this amended complaint is filed and survives the next motion to dismiss. I want you to think about what 7 hours of sworn testimony looks like when the questions are about Jeffrey Epstein, when the questions are about a birthday card, when the questions are about a drawing, when every public statement Trump has ever made about Epstein is laid on the table one after another, and he has to answer under oath. That is not a deposition. That is a reckoning. And Trump built the door to it himself. Smash that like button right now, not because of habit, but because the algorithm needs that signal to decide whether to push this analysis to the next 10,000 people who need to understand what is actually happening here. Let me take you inside the specific event that triggered all of this, because the details matter enormously here. The Wall Street Journal published a report alleging that Donald Trump sent Jeffrey Epstein a letter for his 50th birthday. Not just a casual note, a letter that, according to the Journal's reporting, contained language about enigmas never aging and references to keeping secrets. Trump's response was immediate and absolute. He called it a total fabrication, a complete lie. He said he never sent that letter, never wrote those words, and that the Wall Street Journal had deliberately manufactured a false story to damage him. That is a very specific claim. And it is the kind of claim that has very specific legal consequences. Now, pause here for just a moment, because I need you to understand what happened after Trump made that claim publicly and then filed his lawsuit. The Epstein estate produced a birthday book, a physical bound collection assembled by Ghislaine Maxwell herself, containing contributions from people in Epstein's inner circle. And according to reporting from multiple outlets that reviewed the document, Trump's entry appears exactly where it should be, in the middle of the book, in the sequence that corresponds to when it was reportedly submitted. Independent forensic handwriting analysts, not analysts hired by any party in the lawsuit, examined the entry. Their assessment, as reported by organizations that reviewed their findings, was that the handwriting is consistent with known samples of Trump's writing. I want to be precise here. I am not telling you this is definitively proven beyond any legal standard. What I am telling you is this: the evidentiary picture that exists right now, before any discovery has even begun, already presents serious problems for the core claim Trump is making in his lawsuit. And discovery has not even started yet. Here is what discovery looks like in a case like this. When Trump files his amended complaint and it survives a motion to dismiss, the Wall Street Journal's legal team gets to do something extraordinary. They get to ask questions, under oath, on the record, with consequences for lying. And because Trump himself put the nature of his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein at the center of this lawsuit by claiming the letter is fabricated, every question about that relationship becomes, in legal terms, reasonably calculated to lead to the discovery of admissible evidence. That is the standard. That is the door. So what does 7 hours of deposition look like? Let me walk you through it. The Wall Street Journal's attorneys start with the letter itself. Did you write it? Did you dictate it? Did anyone in your office submit it? Do you recognize the handwriting? Have you ever seen this document before? Each answer creates a branch. Each branch leads to more questions. And if Trump's answers contradict the physical evidence, the forensic analysis, or any documented record, that contradiction becomes part of the public record permanently. Then they move to the broader relationship. You have stated publicly on multiple occasions that you barely knew Jeffrey Epstein. Here is a quote from you in 2002 calling him a terrific guy. Here is documentation of shared events. Here is a flight record. Here is a photograph. Here is a statement from a named individual. Is this accurate? Is this not accurate? Explain the discrepancy. Do you see what is happening here? This is not a deposition about a birthday card anymore. This is a deposition about everything. And Trump cannot narrow its scope because he is the one who made the relationship relevant by filing the lawsuit. Now consider the broader context around this moment. The public understanding of Jeffrey Epstein has shifted fundamentally since 2019. Documentary films, court proceedings, the Maxwell conviction. Hundreds of pages of previously sealed documents made public. The audience that would receive any information emerging from a Trump deposition about Epstein in 2026 is not the same audience that existed 5 years ago. People know more. People understand more. And people are paying closer attention. There is one more element here that I think has been almost entirely overlooked in the coverage of this case. When Trump sat for depositions in the E. Jean Carroll case and in the New York Attorney General proceedings, the transcripts became public. And those transcripts revealed something important about how Trump performs under oath. He contradicts himself. He makes claims that are directly refutable by documentary evidence sitting in front of him. He becomes evasive in ways that experienced attorneys are specifically trained to exploit. That is the man who would sit across the table from the Wall Street Journal's legal team for 7 hours and answer questions about Jeffrey Epstein under penalty of perjury. I am going to say something now that I want you to sit with before we move to the next section. Trump did not get dragged into this situation. He was not subpoenaed. He was not compelled. He walked into a federal courthouse, filed a lawsuit, and handed his opponents the most powerful legal tool available in the American justice system. The question is not whether this deposition would be damaging. The question is whether anyone in Trump's inner circle is going to find a way to stop him from following through. And right now, based on everything I am seeing, I am not sure they can. Stay with me, because what comes next is the part that ties all of this together in a way that should genuinely alarm anyone paying attention. Here is where everything converges, and I want you to pay very close attention to what I am about to show you, because this is the part that no one is connecting publicly. Donald Trump is not facing one crisis right now. He is facing 3 simultaneous crises, each one feeding the others, each one draining the same finite pool of resources, political capital, legal bandwidth, public attention, and strategic energy. And they are all hitting at exactly the same time. Let me show you what that looks like in practice. The first pressure point is the legal front. The WSJ lawsuit is not sitting in isolation. It exists alongside the E. Jean Carroll judgment, which is already a matter of settled law with documented financial consequences. It exists alongside the proceedings initiated by New York Attorney General Letitia James, which produced sworn testimony that became part of the public record. It exists alongside multiple civil matters that are still working their way through various stages of litigation. Each individual case taken alone is manageable for a team of experienced attorneys. But here is the thing that people do not fully appreciate about high-stakes litigation. It does not just cost money, it costs attention, it costs coordination, it costs the time and energy of the people closest to the principal. And when you stack 4, 5, 6 simultaneous legal fronts on top of each other, the system starts to buckle under its own weight. Sources familiar with the internal operations of large legal defense efforts describe this phenomenon as bandwidth collapse. There are only so many hours in a day. There are only so many senior attorneys who understand the full picture. And right now, those hours and those attorneys are being stretched across an unprecedented number of simultaneous fronts. That is the first pressure point. Now, let me show you the second one. While Trump's legal team is managing this expanding portfolio of cases, his political operation is simultaneously navigating the most consequential foreign policy moment of his presidency, the Iran war. 6 American soldiers confirmed dead. a war powers resolution that failed in the Senate by a narrower margin than the White House publicly acknowledges. Republican voices like Thomas Massie and Rand Paul breaking from the party line on one of the most fundamental questions a government can face, the decision to go to war. Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly publicly questioning whether America is fighting someone else's war. These are not fringe voices. These are people with direct lines into the base that Trump depends on for his political survival. Now consider the timing. Some analysts whose work I find credible have raised the question, and I want to be clear that this is analytical inference, not established fact, of whether the decision to refile the WSJ lawsuit was made without full consideration of how the political landscape would look in the middle of an active military conflict. Because the political capital required to weather a damaging deposition about Epstein is capital that is already being spent on Iran, on congressional relationships, on keeping Gulf allies from fracturing. You cannot spend the same dollar twice. And right now, Trump's political bank account is being drawn down from multiple directions simultaneously. That is the second pressure point. Now, the third one, and this is the one I think matters most, public understanding of the Epstein network has fundamentally and permanently changed. I mentioned this briefly in the previous section, but I want to expand on it here because the implications are significant. In 2019, when Epstein's arrest first brought this into mainstream consciousness, a large portion of the public had limited context for understanding the scope of what was being described. That is no longer true. Court proceedings, the Maxwell trial and conviction, sealed documents that have since been made public through litigation, investigative journalism that has had years to develop sources and build documented records. The audience that would receive any information emerging from a Trump deposition in 2026 brings an entirely different level of background knowledge to that information than the audience of 5 years ago. What that means practically is this: information that might have been dismissed or contextualized away in 2019 lands very differently in 2026. The frame already exists in the public mind, and a deposition does not just produce private information. It produces a public transcript, a permanent, searchable, citable document that every journalist, every political opponent, and every future biographer can access indefinitely. Pause here for just a moment, because I want you to feel the weight of what I just described. 3 simultaneous pressure systems, legal bandwidth collapsing under the weight of compounding litigation, political capital being consumed by a war that is fracturing the coalition Trump needs, and a public that is more informed, more attentive, and more prepared to receive damaging information about Epstein than at any previous moment in this story. Individually, each of these pressure points is serious. Together, at the same time, converging on the same man who is simultaneously considering voluntarily re-entering a federal courthouse to refile a lawsuit that leads directly to a sworn deposition about Jeffrey Epstein. This is what I mean when I say the trap is closing. And here is the thing that keeps coming back to me when I look at this entire picture. The most dangerous traps are never the ones that are forced on you. They are the ones you build yourself, step by step, convinced at every stage that you are making the right move. Subscribe right now if you have not already. Turn on every notification, because in the next 48 to 72 hours, based on what I am tracking, there is a development in this case that is going to change the picture significantly. And when it breaks, I will be here before anyone else. Let me bring everything together now, because after everything I have shown you tonight, I want to make sure you leave this video with absolute clarity about what is actually at stake here. 3 layers, 3 simultaneous crises, one man standing at the center of all of them. Layer 1 is the legal trap, a lawsuit that Trump filed voluntarily that was dismissed on technical grounds and that Trump has publicly committed to refiling. The moment that amended complaint survives a motion to dismiss, a deposition becomes legally unavoidable. 7 hours, under oath, about Jeffrey Epstein. There is no procedural escape route available to a plaintiff who initiated the case himself. Layer 2 is the Pandora's box. The evidentiary picture that already exists before discovery even begins. The birthday book, the forensic handwriting analysis, the documented record of public statements that contradict each other, creates a foundation that sworn testimony can only make more visible, not less. Every answer generates a branch. Every branch generates more questions. and every question goes into a permanent public transcript. Layer 3 is the convergence. Legal bandwidth stretched to its breaking point. Political capital being consumed by a war that is fracturing the very coalition Trump depends on. And a public that is more prepared than at any previous moment to understand exactly what emerges from that deposition room. Now, here's the scenario analysis I want to leave you with. Based on everything I have examined, there are 3 realistic paths forward. Trump quietly withdraws the lawsuit before refiling. This is the strategically rational move. It causes short-term reputational damage, but closes the door on the deposition. Trump refiles and the case proceeds to discovery. This is the highest risk path and the one that his public statements suggest he is committed to. Or a negotiated resolution emerges between Trump's legal team and the Wall Street Journal that makes the case disappear without a public filing. Possible, but it requires the Wall Street Journal to agree. And right now, they hold the stronger hand. And that brings me to the question I want you to sit with and answer in the comments right now. If Donald Trump sits across from the Wall Street Journal's legal team under oath and answers 7 hours of questions about Jeffrey Epstein, what happens to the political coalition that is still defending him today? And who among his current defenders is still in that room the morning after the transcript becomes public? Tell me what you think, because this conversation is not finished, not even close. Trump did not get pushed into this corner. He walked into it. That is the sentence I want you to carry with you when you close this video. Subscribe right now, not as a favor to me, but because the analysis you just watched does not exist on mainstream channels. You found something here that most people will never see. And the next piece of this story is already developing. Hit that like button right now. The algorithm uses that signal to decide whether 10,000 more people get access to this breakdown or whether it disappears quietly. You control that. One tap. I am tracking a specific development in this case that sources suggest will break within 48 to 72 hours. When it does, I will be here before anyone else covers it. Before the headlines form, before the spin begins, turn on every notification. Because when this moves, and it will move fast, you need to be the first to know.